everybody. Welcome back to the Irish NFL show in partnership with our friends over at Pundit Arena. Joined again, third night in a row this week with our usual team of the lads, and also Tommy O'Donnell, Munster rugby player. Tommy, as a man in the north that never played rugby, I cannot wait to ask you all these questions. But look, man, you're welcome in. Welcome in.
Cheers. Thank you very much for having me. Nice time of the season to be joining you. Plenty to talk about. Lots of hirings and firings, and obviously playoffs going on. So it's a good time to be chatting NFL.
Absolutely, sir. And obviously, you're in the same position. It's been a weird year, I think, for anybody involved in sports. So it'll be interesting to hear. Obviously, you're taking that as well. 184 caps for Ulster, 13 for Ireland. You've been a core part of Munster for 14 years. First of all, I was going to say, what's the crack? But what's the secret? Obviously, fantastic career so far. But you're welcome in. And I guess, how did you become an NFL fan? Just like us, like just sitting late Sunday night, just having the crack in that sense?
I think that was it. Yeah. When you were back in the academy, and Sunday nights for a student were very quiet when you're in the academy, and you had to be like in for training on a Monday morning. So you couldn't do much else but sit in around 9 o'clock or from 6 o'clock onwards and start watching NFL. So, one of the housemates at the time, Sean Henry, he was big into NFL. He was following Brett Favre and Green Bay Packers. He was a staunch fan. So kind of fell in with him and just started watching and got really into it and started playing the Madden NFL game. And that's where he learned the rules, learned the basics of it, and started to learn the intricacies of it, and just fell in love with it.
Tommy, I have to say it's nice to have another Munster representative, being surrounded by Dubs and lads from Ulster. I'm originally from Cork, but in Dublin a fair bit myself. It sounds like you got into the game in many ways similar to a lot of us. Just I suppose the time frame has been a bit different for all the people on the call. For you, I suppose, since you started watching, any particular standout moments from watching the NFL over the last kind of 10, 12 years?
Standout, God, there's so many every season. There's always some kind of key moments every season. Standout moments. I suppose the transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay was a big one. Patrick Mahomes, really, like the background to it all is really Tom Brady's story, the whole way through it, and the Patriots and their continued success up until this year. So that their ability to keep going, really, when everyone else reached a peak and fell off, and they were able to keep going for basically since 2001. They had nearly 19 years of continued success. So they're the real story of my fandom across the whole. They're the real team, the continuous team, I suppose.
Yeah, some would say the greatest franchise of all time. Tommy, I mean, some people would throw that out there. Just
I think there's a slight bias there, right?
And speaking of franchises, Tommy, for your troubles, you're a Cowboys fan. How did that come about, and what's your thoughts over the past? I suppose since you started supporting them, you've had some good years where they've come close in the playoffs in terms of being the fourth seed, and then the last couple of years have kind of fallen off slightly.
Yeah, I suppose back in 2007, 2008, I first started following them, and kind of Tony Romo was starting to take the reins at that stage with T.O. and getting Jason Witten going, and the high flying offense, really good defense, and they always were on the precipice of kind of breaking into the playoffs, but they never really managed to get over it, and then they ran into the problems of salary cap, and they ebbed and flowed for a few years. But it really seemed like in the last few years they'd gotten their free agents right, they'd gotten their draft policy right, and it looked like we were building, with a nice offensive line, and we were building well, and and then just never seems to click with us. It's always the hope, that this could be the season, but it never really manifests itself at all. This year, I suppose the contract issues with Dak, going in, is he a good enough quarterback? He seems to be a good enough quarterback going in, but we just don't seem to back him. And then he obviously hurts himself then this season, which really our season kind of ended right there when he got hurt.
And Tommy, I mean, just I suppose turning a little bit to your career. I mean, you've played with Munster over the years, and we talk about massive games in the NFL sometimes. But one result that stands out to me as a rugby fan as well as a football fan is when you were playing the Munster team to beat Australia at Thomond Park back in 2010. Now, I don't want to do a Patriots versus Rams or a Giants versus Pats comparison because, Munster Rugby's won a few big games. The All Blacks, of course, back in '78 as well. But, take us back to not the pressure, but the feeling around a game like that. Beating at the time one of the world's great rugby sides, and how you performed, how you felt about it all. Because obviously we got a couple of big games coming up in the NFL next few weeks as well.
Yeah, I suppose the touring sides is always a strange one. It's always one that Munster Rugby are able to get up for. We've got a great history of it. You mentioned like the All Blacks. We've beaten Australia on a couple of occasions. We've beaten the Maori All Blacks in 2016, which I was involved in and I was captain of. So, like, there's something about the one-off games, about that chance to take on, a team that mightn't be expecting you to be as good as you are. And I think we've been lucky. The weather's been on our side a couple of occasions. In Australia, the couple of their wingers suffer from hypothermia, and I think similar enough in the Maori game. But yeah, it's it's an interesting one. It's that chance to go and have a crack really in those touring sides when there's no pressure on you. You can really go out and just let loose, and there's no points on board, and it's just go out and show the fans what you have. Like I suppose in comparison to playoffs, the Heineken Cup games are probably the more similar to what's going to happen now in the next few weeks in the NFL. Like, so they're a bit different. There's a bit more on the line, and there's a bit more bite in those ones, all right. But the pressures are still the same, I suppose. Like, you still have to go out and you still have to, things have to click, and you have to, every facet of the game really has to come together in order for you to get a win.
Obviously capped at Ireland level, Tommy, but a couple of Six Nations. Suffered an injury. I think you were strongly run to get to the World Cup squad in 2015. We've seen similar enough this year. A lot of injuries in this non-pre-season like season with COVID. You've seen that fantastic comeback story from Alex Smith, of course, is probably the story of the year, to be honest. Just how difficult is it as somebody playing at an elite sport level to actually come back from a serious injury?
I think every injury is individual, and you have to approach it like you can never really compare two ACL injuries because there's so many differing factors and surgeries and how you come out the end of it. But in professional sport, we're very lucky to have such dedicated teams around us, and like especially you can see like in the likes of the NFL where the Cowboys, their facility is attached to a quality hospital, like state of the art, with some of the best surgeons in the whole United States operating within that facility. So the NFL has great access to top quality surgeons, and obviously then their support staff are incredible around it. But like the Alex Smith story is incredible. His wasn't a simple injury. He had multiple fractures and multiple ligaments, and how he would have to get up every day and set himself a goal basically to nearly get through the day. And once he started to see success and once he started to see improvements, like obviously it's a testament to the quality of his character, how he was able to get back on the field. And his poor family then as well, like you saw the pictures of his wife in the stands when he was taking those snaps back in when he did return, and how worried she was for him every snap.
Tommy, I don't know whether you'll have seen this, but I'm interested in getting your opinion as a professional sports person. The Lions have appointed a new head coach in Dan Campbell, and he gave a very interesting press conference firstly today, but on his door he has put up Dan Campbell, the dude. And just wondering, what would, if somebody did that, if a new head coach came in at Munster and put that on the door, what would the response amongst the players be, do you think, to something like that?
Oh, I don't know. The Irish response is always a little bit more conservative, I think. But he seems like a serious character. I saw his press conference there he talked about biting kneecaps as he was getting up, and he seems like a really entertaining character. But like you gotta love that. I think like in sports, I think if your personality and you stay true to your personality and allow that to shine through, and there's no, you're not being fake and you're not being contrite, that like the players will rally in around you. Like you see some of the head coaches around the league, like Steve Carroll and Ron Rivera in Washington, like they're real characters and they're real true to themselves, and the players buy into it, and they really seem to love them as coaches, and they really play for them.
Yeah, I think he's already pleased the majority of the Lions fans just by that press conference alone. I think it's something they've been lacking for quite some time. Tommy, just on the season as a whole, obviously you're experiencing kind of strange surroundings yourself in terms of how your season has gone. And obviously the NFL this year, the season started with games and points hitting 50s, 60s like college games, in particular that Falcons-Cowboys game, which was an absolute crazy game. And it looked like the Falcons were home and hose and managed 2 or 3 times the season to throw games away. But just as a whole this season, how have you found it? You found it more entertaining than other years? Was there anything that stood out from your point of view?
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting season. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers got off to an incredible start, and then they barely limped into the playoffs and were soundly beaten by the end of it. I think defenses were definitely on the back foot. If you were a new defensive system coming in like the Cowboys, and you didn't get that time to install like you normally would in OTAs and off-season camps, then you were definitely behind the 8 ball, and you really saw that across the league. And I think it's defenses are starting to get on top now again. They're starting to see tendencies and systems, and they're starting to come to life. The Kansas City defense are kind of similar to last year. They're only starting to get in their stride now. It's like they almost played a basic package and didn't give away too much until they're coming to the tail end of the season. I think it seems like Andy Reid is really after finding his stride, and he really holds his card. He used to go out and really show every play, and in the early part of the season, now he seems to be getting a lot better at holding his run, and his teams are playing their best football at the end of the season. But it's definitely been an interesting one. I think for the most part, the teams that started off well, like the Bills, Green Bay, the Chiefs, they're the ones that seem to be the model of consistency, and they're coming through to the finish.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy, we won't say that the Cowboys were a model of consistency this year, anyway, for sure. And actually, I love you bringing up Dan Campbell and that whole piece. I mean, certainly to me, it was the most entertaining press conference since Adam Gase was introduced at the Jets. But I don't know if that's a good omen for the Lions or not. But focusing on the Cowboys, say for example, tomorrow came round, and you're there on Monday morning next week, and you get the call from Jerry or Mike McCarthy, as he's still there as head coach, which surprised a few, and he says to him, Tommy, we need a hand here. What can you do for us? I mean, where in the Cowboys team would you fill in? I mean, as a flanker, I'm thinking Mike or Will linebacker, but maybe you think you're the answer instead of franchising Dak. What would be your position on the field?
Yeah, I don't think quarterback is going to be my position anyway. But yeah, I think you're probably right in that, in the back row being the comparison for the kind of middle linebacker, outside linebacker position. I'd probably have to grow another couple of inches and get up to about the 260 pounds mark to be middle linebacker, outside linebacker. But I was watching a lot of NFL films recently, and Kevin Green, he was a linebacker for the Rams, the Steelers, and he coached in Green Bay there as well. And he seems to he defined that the outside linebacker in the 3-4 position has to be able to cover like a safety, tackle like a linebacker, and they'll put his hand in the dirt and rush like an end. So that'd be a good position to be. It's you need to be good in all facets of that position. So it's very similar to the back row position, just not stuck to one task, and you can do multiple things and use in a variety of ways that your strengths allow. I'd need to get bigger, stronger, and definitely need about 4.4 speed, I'd say, in order to play there. But
so you're up for it, Tommy?
Yeah? Well, at 33, I think it's a bit of a late switch.
Go for it. Here, obviously, one thing that you, Tommy, have in common with a lot of NFL players this season, not all of them, because some of them did experience it, but what was it like so far this year playing, or I guess in the last calendar year, playing without fans? Like, it must be out. I know it's going to be, of course, going to be very different, but we had Darren Fletcher, BT Sport commentator, on, and I was asking about, what was it like commentating on the Champions League final in an empty stadium? There's nobody there, and you're going nuts. But what's it like actually playing in an empty stadium, and obviously in a very physical game as well?
Yeah, the atmosphere is definitely different. Like the intensity of the games hasn't changed. You're still out of breath, and you're still working hard, and getting fatigued in the same way. But probably where you see it the most is that, like, if you go behind in a game in an away stadium, you don't have that pressure of the fans getting on top of you like you normally would in the likes of Claremont this year, when if we'd have gone down 14 points away to Claremont in a full stadium, you'd have started to feel that emotional pressure from the stands. They'd have been full voice, trumpets going and drums banging. But like this year, it was a quiet stadium, so your subs bench could add as much energy as their subs bench. So you really find that they're the people giving you energy is that your bench, and that's it's obviously easier to communicate on the pitch. It's a lot less line out calling is a lot easier, but I think Aaron Rodgers is benefiting from that this year. He's really having a good time, but you see him smiling there at the weekend. He's just having fun, like.
We had Jason Bell on last night, actually, Tommy, and he said it's like he's having a Mai Tai back there, which was a good analysis, I thought, on how relaxed he's looking in the backfield.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Pat McAfee podcast, and obviously he's a weekly contributor to it, and it's incredible to hear him come on and hear how dry and droll he is, and he's just like, his mindset, he's the perfect mindset to be a quarterback. He's just unfazable, and he's just like, yeah, we'll just go about it, we'll have a bit of fun, just a real cool character, like.
Yeah, certainly he some of the lines he delivers with a straight face on that are quite something. So I was Tommy, be just interested. You mentioned Andy Reid earlier on and the way in which he's learned, and I mean the time management is another piece. I think that he's improved, though 8 winning seasons in a row with the Chiefs speaks for itself. But just interested in your thoughts. Obviously, it's from a distance, but if there were NFL head coaches that you'd like to have the opportunity to play for, or to come in as and to play under, who are the coaches that really stand out to you in the league?
Well, I suppose you can't go really much further than Bill Belichick. Like, he stands out as like the number one coach, really. Like, his motto is do your job, and he installs a system, and as long as you've got the mental capacity and the ability to work within the system, you'll prosper. His well, probably not in the last couple of seasons, but his ability to get rid of trade players and to bring in free agents was probably second to none, and how he's able to maximize players' talents. Frank Reich in Indianapolis seems like a great character. He really seems to be building a culture there with his GM, and he seems to be a guy that the players really want to play for. And there's so many coaches, like Andy Reid. Obviously, he'd be an interesting one just to see his brain and how he operates. Coming up in the West Coast system, he seems to stumble upon the best quarterback that he literally could. Instead of dinking and dunking it in the West Coast, he can do anything he wants with it. So I'd say he's just like a kid in the candy shop at the moment, and the plays and stuff he comes up with.
Yeah, you've kind of alluded to Rodgers and Reid, and just in terms of going forward for this weekend, two great games. I don't think anybody would argue we're going to get a great Super Bowl now, no matter what the permutation is. What's your thoughts for the weekend, and what's your fancies?
I suppose for the weekend, like, it'll be very interesting. Last time Green Bay and Tampa Bay met, I thought Green Bay were going well in the first half, but they anything didn't seem to materialize. So it'll be interesting to see this week now in Green Bay. Tom has been down in Florida playing in the warmth, and last week he played in a covered stadium. So it'll be interesting to see his arm strength in the cold now in the snow of Green Bay, possibly at the weekend, how his arm strength will hold up. He is 43 years of age. He's coming up against an informed defense. I think I heard it like they compare favorably offense versus defense on both sides. I think the weakness really for both teams there will be special teams, and hopefully whoever gets on top in the special teams game could be the edging factor in that one. In the Bills versus Kansas City, I think it'll all come down to whether Patrick Mahomes is fully recovered from his concussion. I think we've seen in the past quarterbacks have played a week post-concussion, but they're not fully themselves. Like, I know they were saying in the media that it wasn't a concussion, it was a nerve in his neck or whatever, but he's still in the concussion protocol. So that'll be very interesting to see how Kansas City go. I think it'll be interesting to see how Josh Allen goes as well. He's really gotten the monkey off his back with the playoff wins. He's got 2 in a row now. He's on form. The locker room there seem to be really enjoying themselves. The only thing they're probably missing is a strong run game, and they'll definitely need it against a Kansas City defense that just seem to be coming to a fore at the right time again.
Tommy, what's your thoughts on the whole concussion protocol? I mean, you probably see it a little bit more in rugby as well, in terms of how it's managed. Like the level of testing that needs to be done on the player this week in order for him to be cleared. Like I read earlier on, he practiced in full today, but yeah, he hasn't passed the protocol yet. Like I know it's obviously different in American football to rugby, but like what's all entailed in that?
I suppose like it's all similar. It sounds similar enough that I think they do the impact test that we do. You know, you do the baseline function, and then obviously if you get a concussion, then you compare back, and you have to get within a certain percentage of your baseline in order to be cleared. But yeah, I think the protocol is probably 5 days or 6 days long, so he's probably still in the middle of it. He hasn't gotten out the far side, and this is obviously just one of those gates that he has to get through. You know, practice in full, get your heart rate up, and see how the brain basically reacts to a bit of increased blood flow and increased cognition that's going through it. Because you find that with concussion, it's not really, it's the thinking part that's really the hardest part. The exercise is grand, but it's like when you're sitting down and he has to learn plays now and study film, that's what could really hurt him, and he'll start getting headaches or whatever, and that's when you'll find that he's really not fully recovered from the concussion.
Tommy, obviously, you know, a couple of big games the weekend. There's another big game of the weekend we're not going to ask you about, but Munster Leinster is obviously tomorrow night. But I'm sure that's a big game for you. But in the NFL world, obviously the biggest thing is it all gets down to the Super Bowl. We sometimes allude to the Highlander equation. There can be only one in the end. I'm sure there's lads in the dressing room as well that follow the NFL, you know, and talk about it as well, as you say, following the academy. But who's your money on them? We're down to 4 now. Who's your pick to ultimately be there in the end?
Just the matchup in the Super Bowl, is it?
Yeah. So who you got to get to the Super Bowl and who you got winning the whole thing? And
I think it'll
basically, I'm trying to give the guys in the dressing room fodder to slag you when you get it wrong. Basically.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. They don't need much fodder. It'll be Green Bay versus Kansas City, I think. I think that's where my heart is going. I think the Bills have done really well, but I think this may be the one step too far for them this year. But I definitely think we're seeing the evolution of a rivalry between them and the Kansas City Chiefs that we'll probably see for the next 5 or 6 years. But I just really want to see Green Bay. I think Aaron Rodgers, his time is limited. I think they've already picked his successor, so he's got 2, maybe 3 years more before his time is done in Green Bay. So if there's a year he's going to go and do it, I think it's this year.
So you think Rodgers will get his second ring before Mahomes gets his second ring then? Yeah.
Probably going on how hard it is to repeat Super Bowls. I think it'll probably be Green Bay.
You think it'll be Green Bay? Well, I'll give you one stat for Rodgers if Green Bay fans want to, you know, hope out. Obviously, they've drafted Jordan Love around the same time as a man you mentioned, Tom Brady, when the Patriots drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. And since Tom Brady turned 37, he's won 3 Super Bowls. So, you know, maybe Rodgers can do similar. I doubt it, but maybe.
Let's see. Tommy, last question, if that's all right. Obviously, you're talking about Tom Brady there, being 43 years of age. Do you think you'd be sitting on the back row for Munster when you're 43? You know, is that your big plan?
43, you'd probably be sitting back on the bench at that stage. Maybe
I don't know how he does it, man.
Sitting up in the stand in a warm seat, I'd say at 43. I don't know how he does it. It's just incredible. Like, you know, like he's 10 years older than me. He's got 20 years of NFL played. You know, he's just an incredible competitor, and I think his will to win is second to none. And like he really sets the standard. You know, he was a team player in New England for how many years? Like, he didn't take the highest salary on purpose, you know, in order to bring in the top free agents. And now he's finally gone down to Tampa Bay to earn the money he's due, but he's brought the winning record with him, and he's brought the free agents that he can acquire with him as well down to Tampa Bay. So I don't think the record is too good for teams hosting the Super Bowl and playing in the Super Bowl. So I'd say that's one of the factors that will go against Tom this weekend. But, you know, if he continues this form and Tampa Bay continue to grow, I think they'll be in an even better state next year, because I don't think New Orleans will be able to compete with them next year. I think New Orleans will be on a downtrend for the next couple of years. One of our S&C coaches in Munster won't like to hear that, and if he hears this podcast, he'll probably kill me. But I think that's probably it's a sad fact with salary cap and stuff. I think New Orleans have probably seen their peak for the next couple of years anyway.
Yes, sir. Look, Tommy, it's been a pleasure having you on, man, and we wish you all the very best for the rest of this season in rugby as well. And hopefully it just keeps going, just regardless of the situation at the minute. So thanks very much for coming on. Hope you enjoy the Super Bowl, regardless who's in it. And yeah, appreciate it, man.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, lads.